Hopefully that, between what the Waterworks is doing, what we're doing, we can definitely, hopefully reshape we'll call it culinary landscape of Toronto and bring everyone to King West.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Table 6. We're your co-hosts, Lori Weir and Dana Duncanson. On today's episode, we're talking about two of the most exciting new developments in the King West neighborhood, the Well and the Waterworks Food Hall. You'll be hearing our conversation with Anthony Casalanguida. He's the general manager of the Well, as well as Stratton Townley, director of developments with Woodcliffe Landmark Properties. And we're so excited to share this one with you.
Yeah, two great projects that I can't wait to see come to life with all the food offerings and the retail. Just like, these are two great destinations that I think this neighborhood, it fits in so beautifully with all the activities and the experiences that are in this part of Toronto. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
What I was fascinated about when we were talking to Anthony Casalanguida, he's the GM of the Well, and he was mentioning when they were putting together the retail mix about the Well, 50% of the space is food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even the retail coming in is actually exciting. And I think there's some other projects that are underway as well. So
I think what was really inspiring too is just how they did so much research. They've gone over to Europe. They researched what's happening in the European food halls, and they're bringing that to Toronto. So I know Stratton Townley, who is the director of development with Woodcliffe Landmark Properties, is going to be talking about how they curated their vendors at the Waterworks Food Hall, and he'll share with you all the hot things we can't miss.
yeah, no, it's really exciting. And when you even take a look at the thoughtfulness that went into the architectural and overall design of these spaces, right? I know that Anthony spoke about the Well and sort of the design there and how they brought in elements of the history of that area. And then Stratton and what they did to retain not only the facade, but just sort of really create a unique experience there.
They're both labors of love.
Certainly.
So can't miss these two properties this summer. I think it's going to be a really cool vibe down at between, Waterworks all the way stretching across Wellington to the Well. And it's going to be great for visitors and locals as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that being said, let's dig into our episode. So today we're chatting with two incredible people representing two of the most anticipated developments here in the King West neighborhood of Toronto. We have Anthony Casalanguida, who represents the Well. He's general manager there. And we have Stratton Townley, who's the director of development at Woodcliffe Landmark Properties. And you represent the Waterworks Food Hall, which is very exciting. So welcome to both of you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So excited to have you. So both of these projects could be described as a true labor of love, given all of the time and the energy and the scope and breadth of the projects. They share that similarity for sure. And one could say, both of them are really kind of breaking this new era of design this in the neighborhood. Can you describe what it's been like for both of you to be part of these special projects?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Yeah. I haven't been on with Woodcliffe the entire time the project's been going on because, again, it's been a labor of love. But, this all started off with the city of Toronto wanting to sort of shed property, and they look to the private sector when that happens. And we approached the project being a heritage developer, and Woodcliffe has a long history of really focusing on preserving properties and seeing value in the past. And we teamed up with Mod Developments to work on a project that was going to bring housing to the city, but ultimately, like we're discussing today, a really unique retail experience. And it predates me, but Eve and Gary, president of Woodcliffe, and Gary, president of Mod, they traveled to basically every major food hall in the world to really understand what makes them tick, what makes them so exciting, and why when people think of food halls, they don't think of North American cities, they think of European cities. So, we looked at this really unique industrial building the city kind of left with us and wanted to turn it into a purpose-built food hall, something where it was, when we went under construction, we thought of it becoming a food hall, not 10 years down the road, you try and convert it into something that it wasn't designed to be. So, it really was looking outward and taking the best of the best from other places in the world and coming back to Toronto and trying to create a best-in-class space that has taken almost 8 years. But for us, we think that it's for all the right reasons, and we're very excited about that.
And just quickly, some of the stats and like how big is it going to be, the numbers of vendors, et cetera?
Yeah, so the whole project, I like to joke around because I think it's around 10% of the size of the well. So in the grand scheme of things, it's quite small. But it is an entire city block. So that is Richmond to the north, Brant Street to the east, Adelaide and St. Andrews Park to the south, and Maud Street to the west. So it is relatively speaking, a very large project and plot of land. The condominium and total size of the project is 350,000 square feet. Wow. There's 290 condo units. There's 15 affordable artscape units that we partnered with Artscape on to provide homeownership for artists. There's Eva's Phoenix, which is a youth shelter on the northeast corner of the project that stayed operational during the entire duration of the project. And the food hall itself is 45,000 square feet.
Wow.
So that is the Richmond Street retail as well as the food hall itself. And we have a 60,000 square foot YMCA.
Yeah.
So which I believe is the largest gym in downtown Toronto.
I think that's a lot to squeeze into that like footprint. And what I love, I'm like in the area always because I live here in this neighborhood. And so being at Waterworks, I got a chance to sort of see inside on what was going on. There was just this huge, wonderful, like grandiose space that just looks like it's going to elevate sort of the experience of what food halls look like for our city. And I love that it's sort of built into the architectural fiber of the neighborhood. And similar to The Well, another great project that just considers the overall feel of the neighborhood. I love that there was so much intentionality that went into really designing these and really considering beyond just your footprint. So I know that for both projects, there's still a lot to come for Waterworks and for The Well. There are some things that are already shaping up there. I've been there numerous times, and it's been like a really great experience and a really great addition to the neighborhood. What can you tell us more about sort of The Well, what we can expect, and just more about that project?
Yeah, so we are also a city block, a little bit larger, but we are 7.8 acres in total. It was the brainchild of three very ambitious developers. It was Diamond Corp, RioCan, and Allied that assembled the plot of land that we currently have, which is Front Spadina, Wellington, and Draper. And what they thought of and what they had envisioned was a multi-purpose or multi-use development whereby you had condominiums, you had purpose-built rentals, you had commercial, you had retail. And the great thing about that is the fact that RioCan was their space is their expertise is in retail, so they take on the responsibility of creating that merchandising mix. Allied is very familiar with the King West area in terms of how you can create great office space, and they realized that there was a requirement for, those firms that didn't necessarily need to fit in with respect to the financial core, but wanted an alternative to that. And so what we've done and what we've actually been very successful in is bringing the office environment now basically west of Spadina, which no one ever thought. I've had the good fortune of working with some great companies, and one of my earliest, we'll call it, responsibilities was the Royal Bank Plaza. And so it was interesting because the Royal Bank Plaza, when it first came out, like when you were looking at office space, you had to be you had to actually be on the path. And anything outside of the path was considered to be less or inferior product, regardless in terms of what amenities they had. But as we'll call it, proliferation of those tech firms, those entertainment firms, those other firms that required space that was not necessarily, your neighbor wasn't a lawyer or wasn't an accounting firm or wasn't a bank. They wanted space that actually attracted the younger, the more, we'll call it, less inclined to wear a suit to work individuals, right? So from that perspective, we basically, they took a very bold chance or risk in terms of building the amount of office space that we have. And so we have 1.2 million square feet of office space. And it's really well appointed space. And the design actually was created in such a way in order to make sure that we had sufficient amount of, we'll call it flexible working environments.
Yeah.
So you'll see as the well steps back, or our Spadina steps back. So our footprint in terms of available square footage for each particular office tenant varies from 30,000 square feet to 11,000 square feet. And what that does is that now we cast a wide net of typical firms that would like to be there. So we have an account, as we have a architecture firm, we have a law firm, we have Index Exchange, we have Intuit, so we have technology, we have Netflix, we have Warner Music, entertainment. So it just a very good mix of those individuals that we believe, or those firms that are great partners to do that. And then we layer in the retail, which is about 350,000 square feet. 75,000 square feet is dedicated to our Wellington Market. And it's an interesting mix of what we believe to be what the neighborhood needs. So we have a 15,000 square foot Health One clinic. We have a gym, which is not a YCM, but which is Sweat and Tonic. A little different in terms of the offering. But and then we have a hair salon, we have a nail salon, and we have a great deal of food. And a typical shopping center typically has about 30, maybe even less, about 25% of its retail GLA dedicated to food and beverage. At the Well, we have over 50%. Yeah. So it's interesting that hopefully that, between what the Waterworks is doing, what we're doing, we can definitely hopefully reshape we'll call it culinary landscape of Toronto and bring everyone to King West.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What you're speaking to is very, in fact, reflective of like the time that we live in, the neighborhood, and sort of how people move through the district. When you think about sort of post-pandemic, where everyone's looking for gathering spaces, where the office space has sort of changed, there's a lot of like thought that went into it. So having that as an addition, as well as the retail, which was lacking in this area for so long, and then seeing how all of that just sort of blends beautifully with the neighborhood is just something that I think is just genius, and it almost requires some level of foresight to thinking about what the future of our district looks like. So I think that's really wonderful. Between the Well and then when you move over to Waterworks, there's just this explosion of wonderful food experiences. And so I'm really excited. I think I went to Mandy's the other day with a colleague. La Plume's open now. There's some other food places that are going to be opening as well. I'd love to hear like more about like sort of what we can expect, because it's Toronto, so there's a pretty high standard in terms of the kinds of food experiences we're hoping for in the area.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know whether or not my colleague will have the same feeling, but there was foresight, but we never anticipated a global pandemic. No, I don't think anyone did. But the reality is that having that much emphasis on food was very, very, we'll call it scary, to say the least.
Yeah.
Just because if you look at, the state of retail post-pandemic, like there was probably a large majority of restaurateurs that you walked on King pre-pandemic, you walked afterwards, they no longer there.
No.
So I think it was slow to initiate the process.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not you felt the same. Absolutely. But it's been, when we look at it, I think that we are very, very fortunate in order to have those individuals. And I think food per se, and in the way in which I'm Italian by heritage, so the table, the dinner table became the place to gather.
Absolutely.
and to talk and to converse and sometimes to argue, as most dysfunctional families do. But I think for us, yeah, we were really pleased that we developed a strong partnership earlier on with Oliver and Bonacini, which we did a large transaction with them. Subsequent to that, Montreal provided us Mandy's and L'Avenue. And then the last, and then the last particular piece that we needed to fill out was the Wellington Market. And the Wellington Market was deal by deal. It wasn't going to a recipe. It wasn't going to a large, we'll call it franchisee type of operator as MTY Group has. It was deal by deal. It was husband and wife, daughter, father transactions, and bringing them to the property and making them understand what their second or third door would look like.
Can you describe what is the Wellington Market going to be? Is that like a grocery store or what's?
So we initially had very, very lofty heights. The reality is that when you look at what Toronto has to offer from a market perspective, there's no way, no how someone can compete with St. Lawrence Market.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah.
It has history, has heritage. It is the city of Toronto. So therefore, their economic model differs greatly with a private owner.
Right.
So that being said, our early days, and I'm not going to be ashamed of saying this, a lot of our calls were to those vendors at the St. Lawrence Market. Hey, want to do a second on the east side? On the west side of Toronto. And a lot of them, when they started discussing the economics, were concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from our perspective, we basically had to reevaluate what we were going to present. So there are, I would say there's a component of fresh. So if you needed to go home and there is a grocer component attributed to it, small and modest that it is. We do have, we'll call it fresh components where people can go and actually go back to their particular apartments or homes or residence and basically cook. We have a lot of, and so you would think that, and a large portion of what we have though is pre-made.
Okay. Like a
Hot,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have vendors like Japadog, we have Daraji, which is a Nook concept that they were doing. We have Samosery, we have Hookies, we have Gus Tacos. So we have 40 in total.
Wow.
So I would say more than 3/4 of them are cooking areas whereby they have hoods. They basically create, we'll call it a hot meal for you. And then others do not have a hood and basically are more in the sweet category.
Okay.
So we have Isabella Mochi Donuts, we have Shake Therapy, we have like Bagels on Fire, those type. We have a sushi vendor. So yeah, so from our perspective, and the one thing that I think would differentiate in terms of our typical food court, which we never want to talk because we have a swear jar for that, is basically we've partnered with Scale Hospitality, and they will be operating our bar. So the entirety of the Wellington Market will be licensed.
Cool.
So an individual can go and grab a taco or a fish and chips, for example, and walk around with a beer.
Yeah.
Or a wine or a cocktail. And then with that also we'll have within the market two quick service restaurants. One is East Tecan and the other one is BHC, which is a Korean fried chicken operator, which will be operating.
Delicious. Well, Dana, when are we going?
What's that?
When are we going?
Well, we gotta go.
So
Well,
it's open. So
East Can's been on my list to go to, and one of my favorites that I think we should check out is Lee, which is at Waterworks and has been open for some time now, right? And I think that it's just so exciting, like all the great experiences in this area. Like, what more is there sort of at Waterworks that will be going into that space? Because I've heard some sort of, a little birdie told me about some of the fun things that are going to be going in there. So I'd like to know more.
I mean, I think the benefit of being as small as our companies are is that we can fly under the radar a little bit more than an Allied and Rio can, which is it's a good thing and a bad thing at times. But I think ultimately, having Caesar come over to our space was a big win for us. I think it was really important. He was someone who committed to King West long before it was what I think Allied ultimately created.
Such legacy in
He
the
owned
neighborhood.
he owned his building. He operated his restaurants there for over 20 years, and ultimately decided that he needed a change. And we had a wonderful 6,000 square foot concrete box that he took on. And he to his credit, he did a wonderful job of designing that space, opening last summer in time to sort of see the last couple of months of the warm weather. And we've been fortunate to have him on our side. Going over to where Beatrice used to be, so we had a coffee shop called Beatrice at the corner of Richmond and Maud. They were open for approximately a year, and in that time we negotiated a partnership with Boxcar Social, which is the owner of Beatrice. And Boxcar's first location was another one of our properties at Yonge and Summerhill. It was our first coffee shop. I'd say we kind of took a chance on them because it was their first operation, and they did an amazing job. And they've since expanded. They operate the Slip at the harborfront for the city of Toronto. So it's a 1,000-person patio. And we ultimately felt comfortable moving forward with them as similar to scale at the Well, operating our bar business, and we will have an open liquor license in the same way. So we will have the ability to enjoy ourselves and have a drink and walk through the space and not feel contained like you would at a patio or a restaurant. And that's unique to our two spaces. That's not something that the AGCO gives out lightly. And I think it'll create a very unique experience that you don't see in North America. You don't see in Toronto for that matter. So going back to those comments about European food halls, that's an element that every European food hall has that we're bringing to Toronto. And I think that's a huge asset that we have because it takes food, which is really exciting, and it elevates it to a different level because it makes it a gathering space. It makes it somewhere where you can sit and have a drink and decide what 20 vendors or 40 vendors you want to choose from. And I think that's really exciting. And I think we've gotten to the same place because of the market. We had lofty aspirations for fresh produce and a fishmonger and a cheesemonger. Like it ultimately, especially with COVID, it presented itself as an extreme challenge, and we've had to pivot, but we haven't deviated from our ultimate motto and goal, which was best in class, high quality, hyper local. We want to celebrate Toronto and the people that live in Toronto and the people that feed Toronto. And I think that's the mix that we've ultimately come with. So, we've been quiet, but we're launching in the end of June, and we have a great tenant mix. I'll start with the bars because those are spaces that we have a partnership with ultimately in order to protect that liquor license. We have that central bar with Boxcar Social. They will be running a cafe to that space during daytime hours, so that can be a gathering space for people, places for people to come and work during the day if they want to get out of their apartment and aren't going to the office. You can see it across the street at the Ace Hotel. I'm sure they don't love that, but it's a very comfy place to do, to take to take a Zoom call. We have a small 600 square foot bottle shop and 20-person patio on Maud Street, which Grape Witches is taking. So they're a natural biodynamic bottle shop on Dundas Street. So it's a group of amazing women that started, I think they started as a restaurant and COVID hit and they pivoted to bottle shop and retail sales. And I think that they've sort of taken a huge share of the market. So we're very excited for them to expand their business into our space. And then finally, we've discussed it in the past, but we have a mezzanine bar that overlooks the entire food hall, and we've partnered with Nick Kennedy from Civil Liberties. So he runs Civil Liberties is the number one bar in Canada, and it's a top 50 bar in North America. So he will be launching a new concept in the mezzanine space, which we can't share exact details on the concept, but it'll be very exciting and very unique. And I think, again, talking about the drink component ties into our food vendors. And, it's been challenging. We can't sit here and say that it's been difficult for us, because I think it's been even more difficult for the restaurant industry, and for them to commit to new concepts that haven't been essentially proven in this market, I think goes a long way. And it's been a lot of hard work. So We have a sushi operator called Aburi Sushi. So they run a Michelin star restaurant in Yorkville. They have multiple locations in Vancouver, multiple locations in Toronto. We have Harry's Charbroiled, which is a burger operation by Grant Van Geerman. So he started Quetzal, which is a Michelin star restaurant, and Bar Isabel and Bar Raval, a wonderful operator and person.
Yeah.
We have Musoshin Ramen, which is on just off of Roncesvalles. So it's a Kyoto-based ramen operator that has a location in Kyoto and one location in Toronto. Very, very unique and just a very flavorful experience. And again, we have other operations like Arepa Republic, which is a Venezuelan arepa operator that has a food truck and a small commissary in Castlefields. Will provide a different price point to sushi. It'll give people a diversity of options. So it's not just, I think people think of certain food halls as being unapproachable from a cost perspective. So we want to have a range of operators. Scoop by Dimitri, which is a unique ice cream operator, similar. Yeah. We have some spaces that are sort of splurge, non-hooded options. Lou Lockham Atelier, which is a Turkish dessert operation on College Street, small cafe. Similar, they'll be operating a space on St. Andrews Park.
Yeah.
So direct access onto the park for ice cream and desserts.
Yeah.
We are doing a deal with a gentleman named, his name's Dave, but Dave's Genuine Deli. It's on Avenue Road, and it's a Jewish barbecue deli operation.
Yeah.
And again, we tried every single operator that showed interest in Waterworks. Our team, our office, we had shared lunches. We trekked out to different cities in Ontario just to try it, make sure that it was up to our standards. But ultimately, we wanted to know that these operators could operate in these environments as well, right? These are, a lot of them are mom and pops that have amazing food and have aspirations, and we were there to support them. So I think it's a really exciting time for us, and certainly excited to share the operation, but ultimately for these businesses to thrive in the space.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing that when you think about the curation of all of these experiences, like this really is truly what Toronto is, just this cultural mix of all these wonderful, especially this neighborhood, just all the experiences that can take place. Food alone, right, tells a story of where people are from, and the fact that you brought in local business is so amazing. So I'm just thrilled. Like, we have so many places to check out, and I feel like there's no shortage of food. I have been in this city for I don't know how many decades now. Well, only so many decades, but
don't eat yourself, Dana.
But it's amazing how in this neighborhood you just continue to discover new cuisines. Like as you
always something to explore.
Yeah, just within like a few city blocks.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
And Anthony, you were also talking about kind of building almost like this promenade on Wellington. Like that's what's really exciting too, that the widening of Wellington, and it feels so European, even just that space. You're strolling around, people with dogs and there's benches there, and that must have also been kind of an exciting part of the design.
Yeah, you know what? So interesting fact is that our property line actually ends at we'll call it the brick facade of each of our buildings. All that land and the linear park that was designed by Claude Cormier, who passed this past summer, was his brainchild. The linear park is all being conveyed back to the city. So part of that conveyance also was the fact with the acknowledgement that each of the 6 restaurants that are facing onto Wellington Street would have the ability to put their patios. So we do strongly feel that, that patio, which is about 15 feet, then you have the public walkway, which is 10 feet, and then you have we'll call it a garden area or planters, which is another 10 feet. That provides a huge opportunity whereby I don't think in the city of Toronto do you have that walkability within the space.
Beautiful.
So we do believe, and we've done some sun studies on it, so on a 12 o'clock day in June, that has full sunshine, for the entirety of the day.
Amazing.
So
Perfect.
it's really, really great, and that's what we not having the sun for 8 months of the year. I think there's going to be a great desire to actually have that space. It's really good. And then on the opposite side, in terms of on the Front Street side, we have this operator at Concord. entertainment, which actually operates the National, which is a beer hall. A bowling alley with gaming in it as well. They will have a 40 by 60 beer garden that will
Cool.
be activated probably next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The timing of both of your kind of openings and just your official openings with the well is perfect for summer. I think that's kind of the answers the why now, and creating these gathering places for people. Like, I think what I'm hearing from both of you is just this magical way that you can experience both of them. It's not just coming and sitting down at a restaurant, paying the check and leaving. You're coming there to explore. It's like a social space. You're gathering, you're coming with your friends, or you're not even, necessarily sitting down. You're just walking around and just taking it all in and meandering the experience, which is so cool. It's very Euro. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people, like, North American culture is all about,
Fast.
leaving work, rushing home, being stressed out,
Yeah.
getting on the streetcar, being upset about too many people being on it. And you think of European culture where, I was in Copenhagen recently, and
Me too.
people are biking down the street, and you're like, wow, you've just commuted and dropped your kid off at work or at school, and you're on your way to work, and you just seem
Relaxed.
very relaxed.
Yeah.
And I think that, not that we're trying to replicate that culture, because we can't change the way that we are, but we can create spaces that change your experiences within them. And I think Waterworks, I think the Well is very similar in the sense that we wanted to create environments where people felt comfortable, and your experience was something where it wasn't just about getting one item and moving on.
Right.
It was I want to walk through the space and just see it. And you think of those European halls and those buildings where you celebrate the past. You look at, we took a building that was given to us, and you have to work with what's there.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we preserved 1,000 feet of frontage of that building. So obviously we did a lot to change the product, and you added a contemporary addition to, I'd say, a building that when it was built, it wasn't overly special from an architectural standpoint. But when you add 90 years of history to a project, it changes everything. Right? It doesn't have to be a beautiful building to be preserved. And I think for us, it was looking at examples in Milan and Barcelona and Lisbon and Copenhagen. These are spaces where the central factor of excitement is the space itself.
Yeah.
Obviously, the vendors and the people in it are equally important, but there is that element where we fundamentally believe, and Woodcliffe's sort of ethos forever has been celebrating the past, modernizing it, and repurposing it for the future. And I think that's what these buildings can do for people is, you want it to be a space where it doesn't matter whether you work in the neighborhood, if you live in the condos upstairs, or if you're a tourist, you feel like this is a real community place. It's not artificial. It's not manufactured. It's authentic.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we will have done a great job if that's what we can ultimately deliver. And I think we have the space done. It's just a matter of programming it to an extent where we can, see that through.
So historically, what was that space where Waterworks is, and what was the inspiration behind it becoming a food hall? Were there any other thoughts on what should go into that space?
Well, I think, through COVID, I think a lot of developers would have gone back to the city and fought for a different use, because the use was ultimately challenged by what's been happening over the last couple of years. We weren't delayed to this point because we wanted to be. We ultimately put the project on hold for 2 years because the city wasn't ready for it. And we hadn't come out of COVID. We were still, in a pretty difficult position. And we decided, we had this structure completed, but we hadn't formally begun the fit out for kitchens. And the whole model that we had originally planned changed. We pivoted and ultimately came up with a different way of launching. And that's kind of why we're here. And again, we wouldn't have changed it. I think it's just a matter of altering our path.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, I did deviate there for a second. So if there was something else you wanted to...
No, I was just curious about what the history of Waterworks.
Yes, sorry. The interesting fact is the original building was the first market in Toronto, St. Andrew's Market.
Wow.
And that burnt down in the 20s. And they replaced it in 1932 with the building that you can essentially see today are the building that a lot of people will remember from, the 30s until
Wow.
the mid-teens, 2015. That was a City of Toronto Waterworks manufacturing plant. So you'll see some elements that we've brought back into the building, but they made plumbing fixtures for Toronto's infrastructure system. And the
Cool
city,
history.
like it does with a lot of buildings, they sort of let it fall into disrepair. And then they conveyed it back to the private market. And we ultimately, through an RFP, so the city did have a lot of say in the mix that came to be. So the YMCA was something that was planned prior to our involvement, but
Okay.
it was something where we worked with them to
Right.
figure out how to make it work. And they wanted to see how we could provide a publicly accessible space in the grade area of the space, in the Great Hall, as we call it. And I think a lot of people would have looked at it as a wonderful center ice Toronto entertainment or event space, but those aren't fundamentally publicly accessible. They're private spaces that people can go in, but they're not accessible to everyday, the everyday population that's just passing through the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So similar to the Well, we wanted an expansive space that people could just come and enjoy.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's what was delivered, is a space that is accessible from Richmond Street, down Augusta from Queen.
Yeah.
There's 2 entrances off of the park that we fought for years for. City loves to say no, and not to bash the city, but I think it's something where you look at a project and you see two doors and windows that drop down to the ground level, and you have full park access is very, very unique and very special. And we have entrances off of Brant Street and Mott Street. So 5 points of access to create this sort of flow, because it wasn't naturally a area that created, it wasn't a pedestrian space. It was a city-owned building that I think they designed it to keep people out of it.
Yeah.
So we had to work with our wonderful team to figure out ways to get people inside.
Yep. Don't you just love the flow though of what we're seeing now? I mean, Ace Hotel is a great example of, you can just pull your laptop out and do work there. Hotels like that in the past have usually had, someone who you probably would not even want to enter the space. Now you have Waterworks that is just this other great space, and the Well as well, just allowing people like accessibility.
Yeah.
And so that flow that you speak of is so true. Like when you go into both of these spaces, it's just one of those spaces that you can move from like walking through a park to walking down the street, and then suddenly you're like in these beautiful gems that exist like in this neighborhood.
Well, what I love about the Well too is, Anthony, when we came down to meet you, you were explaining there's no doors. There's literally no doors. So you can just flow through the space, which is so welcoming. It's so beautiful. And then the other thing that's super cool is, the Spadina entrance is really, we kind of came up with this little analogy where it's like welcoming the visitors, coming off the Gardner, one lane. And then the other side of Wellington, which is connecting like, the community of King West and the people who live there. So it's almost like that cool juxtaposition between like the community who lives there and then welcoming also visitors. Like, I just think that's so cool. It's so permeable, the way that it's so open and free. And then the beautiful architecture of the ceiling. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, it was done intentionally in terms of, you talk about permeability. Like if you go to any of the traditional, if you think about Eaton Center, like there's probably 2-3 entrances that actually have the public, because the intention was to keep people out and basically keep them out. But I said keep the neighborhood out and basically create that level of, we'll call it fantasy,
Right.
that retail tries to promote every single time that you actually go into a shopping center. But we did not feel that was what we want to project. We have a degree of permeability whereby it's meant to be a pedestrian walkway. It's meant to have people, if you're going to a Jays game and you live in this particular neighborhood, you basically go through the Well in order to get to your home
Right.
or to get to your apartment. So from that perspective, it was done intentionally. The brick facades basically have, if you look at each of the buildings and you start on Wellington and you basically go west and then go to Front Street and move from west to east, what that is, and it's very subtle, but it's, each of the building represents a specific design stage within Toronto. So you have a brick. You have the building A, which is closest to Spadina on Wellington. That is the oldest looking brick. Then you move to a more progressive brick. Then you go to precast. Then you go to a different precast. Then you go into the terracotta, and then you go into the glass of the modern, call it high
I didn't
rise.
realize that. Did you know that?
So that's what that's what
That's
we
a
done.
cool
The architects
story.
did have done subtly, so that
Yeah.
way it is basically just a homage to the
Yeah.
architectural design within
That's cool.
within Toronto.
You have another cool piece of history in your building. Do you want to share with her?
Is it
Viewers.
The Globe and Mail doors that you're
Yes.
referring to? Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Globe and Mail, it's interesting that the Globe and Mail actually now is located on the west side of the city. On the east side of the city. And Toronto Star, which was on the east side of the city, now has moved into our building.
Right.
But having said that, when the Globe and Mail moved from their previously eastern location in the city, in their own building, they took the doors from their establishment, and they brought it to the corner of Front to Spadina. When we purchased the building, there was a love for the doors, so we removed the doors from the property before it was demolished. And what we did is that we refurbished them and we put them back into our main lobby of our office tower.
Wow.
It's really cool. It's
Yeah.
really
I
cool.
gotta find that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I remember as a PR intern going to that building and like delivering PR packages on that door. So when you showed us, I was like, that's cool.
So those are where the revolving doors are, and it's interesting. So what we did is that we had this blank space within the two doors, and what we decided to do was actually just pay tribute to the publishing industry that has been at the site, because that was the site of the Toronto Telegram, the Telly, then the Globe and Mail came, and now Torstar's there.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
so much history in that corner of Front Spadina. That's really cool.
Yeah, I was as a child. My mother was a garment worker, so she worked in Spadina for 35 years.
Wow.
So we were suburban all entire life, but she used to trek down the Islington subway and take the Spadina streetcar. But I remember standing on that corner where the actual well currently is, and remembering when they put the last piece on the CN Tower.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, so my family was there. So it was a little bit gives me a little choked up every time I'm at the corner.
Yeah. I love looking at the history of Toronto. So before Globe and Mail, this area was really more industrial in nature. And then you did have the garment district, and now it's sort of shifted into what we call King West, which is a part of the bigger area of the downtown West. So I love that there is this respect that's given to the history by having those doors there. And then just even the thought of the bricks and sort of how that plays out in the entire project. And then for Waterworks, I know, and this is something that we've been seeing a lot more. I think Allied Properties has really introduced this Class I. I'm not really sure what do you call that? Like the description of what Class I is.
It's like brick and beam, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a office class that Allied created because they created value in these buildings that ultimately, I think you said it earlier in the podcast, banks weren't too interested in, but have become, our office is in one of them. I think we're probably in the nicest one at King of Portland right now.
Yeah.
It's special.
Well, you see that a lot along King and around King and Portland, and I know that Waterworks, like it's great to also see that history being kept by the retention of the facade of the building. And you spoke a little bit about sort of the struggle to be able to get those nice windows or just that opening or entry to the park. Do you want to talk more about the architectural design of Waterworks and sort of, I would imagine there's some historical context that's there that a lot of people don't know about, but also why was it important to keep the sort of footprint or the exterior of what was there before?
Well, I mean, I think there's a multitude of factors. Woodcliffe is a company where what you see and what we try and show you day one is what we ultimately deliver. There's not a lot of ambiguity, and we call it value engineering in real estate, where you promise something and you ultimately deliver something completely different. But the city is very good at standing up for heritage. And, I think there's been decades, and this would predate me in the industry, where they kind of took their foot off the gas and allowed developers in the city to demolish a lot of very important buildings. And this was not one of them. This was a building where they had aspirations to preserve it, and they looked to the private sector community to see who could come up with a great concept. They had their own concepts. Build Toronto, which is now Create Toronto, is a development arm of the city. So they represent Toronto's surplus land. They they do a good job of putting together plans and proposals for a site.
Yeah.
And then they ultimately go out to the private sector to deliver it. And we came in with our team at Woodcliffe, Mod Developments, and a wonderful team of consultants to reimagine what this building would look like and deliver an incredibly contemporary and beautiful condominium, which, again, the Well has some rental project or units. Rental units you sort of benefit from in perpetuity. Once you sell a condominium unit and you deliver it to your purchasers, there's no benefit to us anymore. But we committed to a sort of quality and mix of unit that I think people who live in the building are incredibly proud of, and we're incredibly proud of. And then ultimately there was the entire 2.5-story building at grade.
Right.
And the idea was, let's create flows. There was a courtyard in the middle. The courtyard's still there. So we have a courtyard in the center of the space that will marry our sort of Richmond Street retailers like Sue Lee's restaurant with the food hall. It'll be programmed. We'll have fun experiences like fire pits and champagne bars in the winter and areas for people to dine outside in the summer. And that was a space that sort of took the office component of the project on Richmond Street and married it with the Great Hall manufacturing component. I think some unique elements that we brought to the project from an operations standpoint, from a design standpoint, is we wanted the back of house or the area, we wanted the entire ground floor of the food hall to be about the customer experience.
Right.
And we wanted it to be about food and about, that experience of people getting to spend time together, have, a varying types of seating to sit at. You can sit at the bar at each vendor. You can sit in, comfortable dining experiences like you're at your house, but you're in a commercial environment. And we put all of our back of house downstairs. So we underpinned the entire heritage building and built a 15,000 square foot basement underneath it while it was still there. So we did all of it while the building sat in place. And
that's very
for
cool.
us, it's we have genderless bathrooms in the basement. We have staff bathrooms in the basement. We have storage, cooling. We have refrigerated garbage rooms to keep pests away. And we did all of that because we didn't want it to be on the ground floor. We didn't want it to take up a lot of the space. It was going to impede. You'd see too much of the back of house upstairs. And those were elements that we took from tours in the United States, tours in Europe, because you see the best of another space and you find a way to incorporate it into your project.
That's cool. Just Anthony, I know there's something very cool also about your space that when you said refrigerated garbage, just pertaining to sustainability at the Well, can you share with people at home what that is? Because I think that's very unique.
Yeah, I think what makes the Well and what we've actually did was actually we extended the district deep lake water cooling system to the west of Toronto. So what that is basically is just the giant loop that is in Lake Ontario. And Lake Ontario has this incredible ability to be always at 4 degrees Celsius, which allows ultimately the water to actually go into Lake Ontario, come out, and basically provide us the sufficient, we'll call it cooling capacity to provide air conditioning. Just in layman's terms.
That's so cool.
But what we did is that we went beyond that, and because the district heating and cooling system didn't have the capacity to feed a lot of the buildings west of the city, we actually created this large well that sits underneath our property.
So you have a well in the well.
Yeah, we have a well in the well, which basically is a reservoir that they add a coolant solution to, or a solution to it. So in the winter, it provides hot water from a heating capacity and then cold water to provide cooling in the summer. So the
Very cool.
entirety of the campus, including all the residential buildings, commercial, and office towers, are on this system, which
That's
is the
awesome.
N-Wave district
Super cool.
water
Yeah.
system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. It's like it's very like zero carbon footprint in terms
Yeah.
of what it offers, and it's for us it provides, from an operating perspective, it provides cost certainty, so you're not necessarily have huge fluctuations in terms of utility costs. In terms of if you have a record hot summer, like your chiller costs that you would typically do on your buildings would go high because of the fact of the demand required for it. So now we're at a set rate over a certain period of time, and because we do not have the equipment to facilitate the chilled water through a cooling tower and through a chiller, our 38th floor is dedicated to Era, which is the restaurant that is currently
Beautiful.
up there, and they will have also a 7,000 square foot outdoor patio on the roof.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Both of you, I know Dana and I were talking about just the footprint that both of your beautiful spaces take, provides so much amenity for the local residents who live there, but also they're truly anchors in the community. Like, I think that's what's also super cool is you're providing such incredible benefits to the people who live, but then it's become like a destination, for all of Torontonians and visitors. Was that kind of intentional when you were building this, or I know you weren't building the space, but the original vision of the space? Or how do you feel, the Well and Waterworks contribute to kind of building community?
I think from our perspective, we definitely, it was purposeful. When you look at the population when you're stabilized with respect to residential and office, we had anticipated our community or our campus probably would have 11,000 people on a daily basis. And you can't sustain, let's say, 325,000 or 350,000 square feet on 11,000 people per
Right.
day. You obviously have a lot of density in the surrounding community, but we do believe that you require a great deal more footprint. Like, you can't substantiate a 70,000 square foot market if you're just relying on the 2 kilometer
Yeah.
radius. So there
Yeah.
was definitely a thought that we are going to require those from outside of our immediate trade area in order to visit the well. And also, a Sephora or a Lululemon or Indigo would also believe that that would be something that they would be attracting a group outside
Right.
in order to continue the growth within their stores. Yeah.
And you have some cool like pop-ups and just other things that are just kind of driving people down there all the time.
Yeah, you know what? For us, we're almost finding our identity. Like,
Yeah.
we have not, we still haven't presented our true personality, because our primary goal is to launch the market, and our market is very key in terms of who the well
The Wellington
is.
market.
The
Yeah.
Wellington market. So from that perspective, it is something that we're going to grow into our shoes type
Yeah.
of thing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we're an awkward teenager, when you have to just develop.
You have braces
we're in that
on right now.
Yeah, we're in that
Yeah, yeah.
awkward stage at this point in time, so we're just developing ourselves to see exactly and we will evolve. I think that, I tell my team we need to be bold in terms of how we approach things, and we're going to make mistakes. And the community has a lot of expectations on us, and I think that hopefully there's a little bit of patience, but we'll hopefully get it right, and we'll adapt and we'll pivot in order to understand exactly what are the needs of the media community, because I think that's what it's very important for us to always keep in mind, that we are part of the King West community. We don't want to be, we'll call it a centerpiece within that. I think we're just part of just the fabric of the community, in which makes us great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that this is a large but ever-growing community, and from day one, we wanted to create a safe space, enjoyable environment for the community. And we've always said that we're an amenity to no one.
Yeah.
We have, like Anthony said, we have 300 units upstairs, but that's not going to sustain 20 vendors downstairs,
Right.
So we recognize that it's not organic foot traffic. You do have to draw crowds outside of the neighborhood. The numbers are staggering when you actually think about how many people pass through the neighborhood every day. But
And dogs.
lots of dogs. We have probably the best dog park in downtown Toronto at our doorstep. So for us, it really was being authentic, being a place where people who live in the King West neighborhood want to come to Waterworks. They feel like this is home for them. They don't feel like it is home for tourists and people outside of Toronto. And I think there's areas of King West where people do feel that way, where they don't feel like they're at home in their own neighborhood. And we want to create an environment similar to Europe, where people who live in the community, tourists can come and see people living in their own community and enjoy that and see Toronto for what it is. It's a diversity. It's a very unique environment. I think we all love the city for what it is, and that's been our goal since day one. Is we wanted to deliver a best in class building, and I think we've done that, and we're very happy when we hear the positive feedback we've gotten just in terms of where the building is at. We're getting to that point where we're going to launch. We have the vendors that we're extremely proud of, the operators, the bar operators, and the next step for I think both of us is that operational excellence. It's ensuring that the building's there, the infrastructure's there, the vendors are there, but that we're delivering a quality of or a standard that is high. People come to the hall, they're not waiting for their food. They have places to sit. It's clean, it's safe, it's an enjoyable experience. And I think when people see that, they'll continue to come back.
Absolutely.
And
we're excited.
From a programming perspective, it's about differentiating. It's changing the scope of what you do week to week and month to month. And event spaces are huge, right? We have a 12,000 square foot event space that overlooks the food hall on our mezzanine level. And that's a space where people who wouldn't otherwise come to the food hall get to see it and they can come back. We have a YMCA that will have 2,000 people coming through a day. That's families that come on weekends. It's programming for children and elders, for that matter, that they can come and enjoy the neighborhood after they've spent time in an amenity.
And you mentioned art installations as well.
Yes, and another, for us, it's about celebrating Canada and Canadian artists. So we're doing an art installation with a group called Studio Ninth. So they're an art curation company that work with a lot of developers in the city. And we've selected 12 Canadian artists to each work on individual pieces that would be part of an art installation for us. So again, it's kind of partnering and championing the community, but at the same time, it's providing people with another reason to come, another reason to enjoy the space. And ultimately, while you're there, you recognize that you have some of the best food and drink that you can possibly have in the city.
Well, I got to say, I think that as we experience the evolution of our community, to what you were saying, not being an amenity, but truly being anchored, both the Well and Waterworks are truly anchors that will be a part of this moment in Toronto history. I think that it's a legacy piece to the city. And so when you think about the intentionality behind the design, behind who you have in these spaces, the collaboration, I can't imagine the amount of time that's gone into working together collaboratively with all of the developers and all the other teams to really bring it together. This is truly a labor of love. So, yeah.
Congratulations
Thank
to
you
both
both.
of you.
Thank you
this
for
has
having
been
us
great.
on.
We're really excited to eat.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes, can't wait.